I'm going to talk about central dogma as a cross-hierarchical principle of biology and try to connect that to the concept of individuality. So what is central dogma? Central dogma of molecular biology, in one formulation of this concept, posits the unidirectional flow of information. So information travels from nucleic acids to proteins, but not from proteins to nucleic acid. And this unidirectional flow of information is considered to underpin the non-inheritance of acquired characters, or Lamarckian inheritance. And so this is because information in nucleic acids does not come from protein or indeed from any other components. And for this reason, whatever that is occurring outside of nucleic acids, the information outside of nucleic acids will not flow into nucleic acids because nucleic acid is a read-only memory. And for this reason, acquired characters cannot be inherited. And interpreted in this manner, central dogma also underpins the theory of evolution. So modern understanding of evolution posits that genetic information is created by mutation, selection, and random genetic drift. And this idea is formulated as a mathematical theory of population genetics, and that theory hypothesizes or assumes the dynamics of genetic information or the frequency of changes in frequency of alleles and genes are separate from the dynamics of genotype to phenotype mapping. For example, dynamics of genetic information is independent of transcription, translation, gene regulation, phosphorylation of proteins, and all that. And therefore, population genetics pretty much altogether ignores the dynamics of genotype-phenotype mapping. And this is possible because of the unidirectional flow of information from genes to the rest of the components of individual. Because this flow is unidirectional, the process that is occurring outside of nucleic acid, such as development production of proteins, gene regulation, and so forth, does not cause any directional changes to genotype, and instead genotypes undergo random changes. And therefore, the theory can simplify the situation by saying, well, the genotype changes randomly, and basically just ignore the dynamics happening within the individual. The individual is here is demarcated by this oval shape, and focuses on the population level dynamics. So we can generalize central dogma slightly. So originally, this idea of central dogma was formulated in chemical terms. So it talks about nucleic acids and proteins. But we can talk about it at a sort of functional level and generalize it as a reproductive division of labor. So in this generalized formulation, central dogma posits that genes transmit genetic information, so they're transmitter of information. And enzymes, they do not transmit the information, but instead expresses this information to help genes transmit that information. So genes are transmitter and enzymes are expressor of information. Importantly, enzymes do not transmit information, meaning that information contained in enzymes will not be transmitted, so this is a dead end. And that also implies that the information cannot flow back from enzymes to genes. So generalizing central dogma in this way, the benefit of doing so is that now the central dogma of molecular biology is just one specific example of a more general biological pattern, or reproductive division of labor. And perhaps one of the most famous example of another reproductive division of labor is that seen in multicellular organisms, as introduced in previous talk. So multicellular organism consists of many cells, and cells are in many organisms, the cells are divided largely into two types of cells. So one type is called germline cells. These cells transmit genetic information. And then the rest of the cells are called somatic cells. So those cells do not transmit information but help germline cells transmitting it. So here's a schematic illustration of this separation between germline and soma cells. So here are the gametes and they unite to form a zygote. So here this is germline, this is lineage of germline cells. And these blue dots are somatic cells. They derive from germline cells. They may replicate, but these somatic cells, while helping germline to transmit information, they themselves do not transmit information across generation. So these are again dead-end lineage. So information contained in somatic cells will not make it to the next generation. So here's a barrier between somatic cells. And this barrier is known as Weismann's barrier. So here's the illustration where the Weismann barrier is present. So this is germline cells. Oops. This is the germline cells. These are somatic cells. Somatic cells don't transmit information. And this is just an illustration, hypothetical situation where soma cells transmit information to next generation, although this doesn't happen in reality in many multicellular organisms. And an important consequence of this is that whatever, if Weismann barrier is present, and it is indeed present, whatever is going on in the population dynamics of cells in this part will have no effect on directly, will have no direct effect on the information transmitted in germline cells. The other way of saying it is the population dynamics of cells within an organism do not directly affect the genetic information of the offspring of that organism. So this means population dynamics of cells within the organism and population dynamics of organisms are two separate things, two different scales as a first approximation. So the dynamics of starting with an egg, developing into adult, that's a population dynamics of cells that does not directly affect the information of the offspring. So this can be singled out from the rest of the process and separate from natural selection, random genetic drift, and so forth. So this allows us to separate developmental biology and evolutionary biology as a two separate fields. As a first approximation, it's a good approximation. So what this amounts to is that organisms can be now regarded as reproducing individuals in this evolutionary dynamics of organisms. So cells are not individuals in this case, but organisms are from evolutionary point of view. So reproductive division of labor, or the generalized central dogma, contributes to the origination of individuality. And there are other examples of reproductive division of labor. The famous one is that between queens and workers in eusocial insects, such as bees and ants. So central dogma is then organizational principle. Generalized central dogma is organizational principle that is observed across vastly different biological scales. And this doesn't actually exhaust the examples. There are more examples than this. So the reproductive division of labor seems a very general pattern. And the obvious question is, like, why does the reproductive division of labor evolve so repeatedly? Well, what's the general principle behind this? So that's to answer this question. So thinking about evolution of reproductive division of labor, we encounter an apparent paradox. So the logic of natural selection is that individuals should maximize the self-reproduction. And now imagine a system with reproductive division of labor. For example, here are the germline cells, here's the soma cells, and now I'm abusing the word individual to refer to not the organism, but let's regard cells as individuals within organism. Then we encounter a paradox because reproductive division of labor means altruism. So for example, helpers, the somatic cells, they gave up their own reproduction and help others reproduce. Or reproducers, they sometimes, germline cells, they have to produce helper cells once in a while, and that means that reproducer cells also have to incur cost from spending resource in producing somatic cells. So the system with reproductive division of labor always involves altruism, so self-sacrifice to help others, increase the fitness of others. And that seems to go against the logic of natural selection. So how come that reproductive division of labor evolved? In a system where these entities within a system cooperate with each other, the system like that is always susceptible to invasion by cheaters. The cheaters are those individuals that don't cooperate. So if you have a system with cooperating agents, and then cheater is like a lazy guy that focuses on their own self-reproduction, and this guy then has a higher fitness within a system, so they will spread. And if they spread, the system will collapse. So reproductive division of labor seems susceptible to invasion by cheaters and seems to go against natural selection. The classic theory that tries to explain how reproductive division of labor evolves is called kin selection theory. So kin selection theory posits that reproductive division of labor can evolve if relatedness, represented by R, is high. So what is relatedness? So relatedness is talking about how the genetic variation is partitioned into different groups. So suppose, for example, think of multicellular organisms. Here, there are 4 multicellular organisms, and each multicellular organism consists of a population of cells. So let's suppose a situation like that. And the orange ones are the cooperative, altruistic cells, and green, blue one are selfish cells, maybe cancer cells. And high relatedness refers to a situation where these guys are nicely separated into different groups. Good separation. That's high relatedness because altruists are related to altruists, selfish are related to selfish, so related ones, genetically related ones are together. And the low relatedness is a kind of opposite situation of that partition where everyone is well mixed. Okay? So there is no separation of selfish and altruistic between different groups into different groups. And a good situation, quote unquote, is a high relatedness situation, because if you have high relatedness, then group with mostly altruistic individuals will perform better than the group with mostly selfish individuals. So altruists can survive and evolve. So that will select for reproductive division of labor. That will at least allow evolution of reproductive division of labor. Low relatedness, on the other hand, is a bad situation, because then cheaters, the selfish genotypes, they can spread because they always have higher fitness within the group. So the classic theory posits that yes, the reproductive division of labor, including central dogma, can evolve if relatedness is high. So this is a classic theory. And what we are going to tell you is we got opposite result to this classic theory. So our model predicts that the reproductive division of labor, the generalized central dogma, evolves when relatedness is actually sufficiently low rather than high. So the bad situation causes evolution of reproductive division of labor. So how come that's the case? So we made an individual-based computational simulation model. Just for simplicity, let's fix our mind and say these are multicellular organisms. Okay, so this one big circle is a multicellular organism. Small characters are cells. Okay, and the model consists of a population of organisms, and each organism consists of a population of cells. Cells divide and organisms grow, and when the number of cells reach some threshold, then organisms split randomly. Just a very simple, primitive form of multicellular organisms. An organism can also shrink and die, and they are competing with each other between organisms as well as between cells within the organism for finite supply of resource. And we assume that each cell can take 2 cell states. They can change their cell type. And depending on their cell type, they may have different phenotype. Okay, so phenotype is, there are 2 kinds of phenotypes. So one is this represented by Kp. So if a cell is in state P, cell type P, then this cell will invest fraction Kp of its resource in investing in domatic function. So this is basically contributing to the group. So increasing the fitness of a group. So increasing fitness of an organism. The rest of the fraction is invested to self-replication. Okay? So each cell has a finite resource. Okay? Then it can allocate into 2 things. One, for myself, to replicate for myself, and the rest to help others, so that everyone in the same organism can replicate faster. Okay? So there is a trade-off. And depending on the cell type, they may change the fraction of resource they invest. Okay? So at time 0, I assume that P state and Q state are identical. So there is no difference between cell type in terms of strategy of investment. and I want to see whether there is any difference evolving, coming out coming about through evolution. And dp and dq refer to the transition probability of cell state, so they can change their cell state. And initially, very low rate of transition, and I want to see if transition also evolves. Okay, so initially P and Q are identical in terms of phenotype, and as evolution proceeds, they may differentiate. This is just a bookkeeping. So the growth rate or fitness of cell is defined by fraction of resource that individual cell invests in self-replication times the average fraction of resource invested in somatic function in that organism. Okay, and so that's the model. And so we run this evolutionary simulation model varying different parameters. One parameter we change is mutation rate of these traits. The other parameter we vary, that's y-axis, is the split threshold. So that's when the maximum number of cells at which organism divides. So when the number of cells reaches this threshold, then organism divides. That determines the population size of cells within the organism. So we vary these two parameters and to scan what happens. And in this black region, what happens is that the system mostly consists of just a single cell type. So the other cell type is very, very, very present. And the one that's absent, when the cell type that is present in the system has a certain fraction of the resource investment. So these blue lines are the fraction of resource investment on somatic cells. And the cells that are absent undergoes wild fluctuation because they are not under any natural selection. In this region of the parameter space, something interesting happens. So initially, two cell types, P and Q, have same traits. That's the assumption. But then evolution causes some differentiation between them. And after evolution completes, the situation is depicted here. So P cell doesn't invest anything in somatic function. Q cell invests a lot in somatic function. And P cell differentiates into Q cell, but Q cell does not differentiate into P cell. So the flow of information is unidirectional, and P cell doesn't provide somatic function. So this is a reproductive division of labor evolving in this system. And then next we measured the fitness of the system. And fitness of the system is shown here in the gray line. X-axis is time. So as reproductive division of labor evolves, which happens around million time step, the fitness increases, or overall fitness of the system increases. And in parallel to that, the relatedness, that's the partition of genetic variation, okay, that also increases. Meaning that the reproductive division of labor evolves, that increases relatedness, that makes it a good situation for evolution of altruism. And therefore, the system increases fitness. Okay? So reproductive division of labor seems to increase relatedness and thereby increases fitness. And that doesn't happen when reproductive division of labor does not evolve. And this is just a graph showing that not just between these 2 points, but just in general, red region is like this and blue region is like that. But the general point is that the reproductive division of labor evolves in this region, and it increases relatedness, and therefore increases fitness of the system. So we wondered why reproductive division of labor evolves. Why does it increase relatedness, and so why is it good for system? So here's our hypothesis. So suppose a situation without reproductive division of labor. So every entity, every replicating elements, like cells, can in principle contribute to genetic information. In this case, any cell can, by mutation, become cheetah, selfish cells, like cancer cells, and so they can spread. But with reproductive division of labor, okay, only subset of cells are capable of transmitting information. The vast majority of cells are not. They are helper cells. They cannot transmit. So that means that if cheetahs emerge in this part of population, they don't count for evolution because they are not capable of transmitting information. And so that means that the population size will effectively be reduced because of reproductive division of labor. And therefore, reproductive division of labor increases relatedness, and therefore makes a good situation for evolution of cooperation, and that's why fitness increases. And this is just a test, a simulation test to verify this hypothesis, but I think I will not talk about that, but just you can believe me that that's okay. And so that was the result. So our model predicts that reproductive division of labor, or generalized center dogma of biology, evolves when relatedness is sufficiently low. And the idea is that when relatedness is low, system is suffering from invasion by cheaters. And if system evolves reproductive division of labor, that makes relatedness higher, so it prevents evolution of cheating type, and therefore it achieves higher fitness, and that's why reproductive division of labor evolves. Okay, that's our logic. So reproductive division of labor evolves as a protection against cheater evolution. That's the prediction of a model, or for experiments, that will be a hypothesis that we want to test using experiment. But this is a theoretical work. And these results relate to the, so how do these results relate to the origin of individuality? So the low relatedness means that evolution happening within group is impactful. We cannot ignore evolution happening within group. So evolution happening within group is basically same as cheetahs spreading. Okay, so if you have a group, cheetah emerge, they will spread. This is a form of natural selection, right? But reproductive, so low relatedness implies that this kind of thing is happening a lot. And so low relatedness means that we cannot ignore evolution happening within group, but the reproductive division of labor increases relatedness, so we can then more easily ignore evolution within the group, and therefore the reproductive division of labor contributes to the origination of individuality. So that was the things I said in the early part of this, of my talk. And how much time do I still have? 10 minutes? Okay, all right. Question. Okay, so then let me compare then. So our hypothesis is the reproductive division of labor evolves because it prevents evolution of cheating. Okay, that's our hypothesis. And this is a new kind of hypothesis. And to say that this is new, I need to talk about the classic hypothesis, the previous work's hypothesis. So actually, it was also introduced in the previous talk. So the classic hypothesis says that the reproductive division of labor evolves because it increases group level production efficiency. Or here, the production efficiency means fitness per unit resource investment. So what this means is that if you have a system without reproductive division of labor, then each entity, each cell within an organism, or each insect individuals within a nest would have to do multiple tasks, both reproduction as well as zoomatic task. And with division of labor, each entity can be focused on one thing, one task. So that's more efficient. That's the classic idea. So overall, it's better if you divide the labor. Now, this classic hypothesis actually involves an extra assumption, namely that if you have finite resource, if each element has a finite resource available for investment, and so if there are multiple tasks, you have to invest your resource in different tasks. And the assumption required for this hypothesis to work is that return on the resource investment must be accelerating. Only then it makes sense to do all in. If not, you should divide resource into multiple tasks, okay? So only when the return on the resource investment is accelerating, then one entity should invest all resources in one task, the other entity invest all resources in other task, and they put together perform better, okay? But if the resource investment does not bring accelerating return, then this idea doesn't work, okay? So the classic hypothesis requires this assumption. Now this means that every time reproductive division of labor evolves, like for example, it evolves in multicellular organisms, it evolves in eusociality, it evolves within the cell. Every time it evolves, you have to come up with why accelerating return. You have to explain that. Is there a general reason? I don't know. To that, our hypothesis offers advantage because our hypothesis talks nothing about non-linearity of return on the resource investment. It just assumes that cheetahs has to arise. And we know that cheetah occur across many systems in biological scales. Like, for example, cancer cells are cheetah. Eusocial insects, we know there are cheetahs. Egg-laying workers are cheetah. We know cheetahs in central dogma. Shellfish genetic elements are cheetahs in central dogma. So cheetahs are known to occur. So our hypothesis provides more general explanation compared to the kin selection theory explanation. There is another thing that I wanted to say. So our hypothesis is also more specific, okay? So classic hypothesis says, oh, it's good to divide labor. Okay, that's classic hypothesis. There is nothing, no mention of reproductive division of labor. Okay, any division of labor can bring accelerating return. Why should it be reproductive division of labor? Okay, but when you look at actual biological pattern, I don't have a table, but I just have a schematic diagram. Each time any division of labor evolves, that's usually reproductive division of labor. And only the subset of systems that evolve reproductive division of labor also evolve non-reproductive division of labor, but not vice versa. Okay? So reproductive division of labor is much more common phenomenon than non-reproductive division of labor. The classic theory can't explain this. You have to come up with another explanation why reproductive division of labor is more likely to bring accelerating return than non-reproductive division of labor. In contrast, our hypothesis works only for reproductive division of labor. Okay? And that's why our hypothesis is also very specific. And it doesn't require extra assumption to explain why reproductive division of labor is a general pattern. So that's all I need to say. And I just want to say thanks for my former student, Dominic, who is currently doing postdoc at the University of Tokyo in Komaba campus, and my colleague, Austin Gunley, and also fans. Thank you.